Rob Dillingham has to be considered one of the most fun players to watch in the entire 2024 NBA draft class. Ever since his Donda Academy and Overtime Elite days, he's had viral video after viral video of his aggressive, over-the-top style play, and while he came under more control playing in the more organized system of Kentucky this year, he still provided a ton of highlights while looking much more efficient than years past. What kind of player is Dillingham actually, though? In the past, while looking fun to watch, he was a bit of an inefficient shot chucker, quite frankly. This year, we saw a different side of him, and now we can envision that he could be much more. But how much more? Is he likely to end up as an instant offense, high-usage six-man type, or does he have true superstar potential as a high-level scorer? Today, we look at the pros of his game, the cons, and try to see what kind of player Rob Dillingham will be at the NBA level. But with that, let's get into it. Rob's shooting was much improved in his 1 year in college from what we saw in Overtime Elite. In OTE, he shot 31% from 3, which ended up all the way at 44% for his season at Kentucky. Is he just that much better as a player over a single season? I don't think so. I just think he ended up in a system where he was brought more under control, which did wonders for his overall efficiency. I think at his previous stops, he always had this level of shooting talent. He didn't just go from a poor shooter to a great one overnight. In all likelihood, it's just that at Kentucky, he was putting up realistic shots, and at OTE, he was shooting like he thought he had the game breaker in NBA Street Volume 2. A lot of that is just the maturation process, and it seems like he matured a ton moving into the college game this past year. Based on what we did see this past year, I think what he did at Kentucky is repeatable. I see him as a real threat around the perimeter, and I think it will translate to the NBA. When he's on the floor, he'll be a dangerous shooter. He has all the traits of a dangerous shooting option both off the catch and off the dribble. He was 47% off the catch on the year. His release is super quick and his relocation game is really advanced. All in all, Rob has a couple of skills that are absolutely pro-ready, especially as a scorer, and his shooting is absolutely one of those things. On his shot creation, it should come as no surprise to anyone that has watched any Rob Dillingham over the years that his shot creation game is the strongest aspect of his game overall. He's always been electric off the bounce, and at Kentucky, things were no different for him. There are some players that just have that special ability to make creating your own offense look easy, and he is one of those players. His game off the bounce frequently impresses, and he easily, to me, is the most dynamic shot creator in this class. He finishes effectively at the rim, he has good floater, his pull-up game is absolutely ridiculous at times, so on and so forth. Just like with his shooting, I see zero concerns with his shot creation translating to the NBA. The way that he gets whatever shot he wants is really impressive, and his only flaw as a shot creator really is, I suppose, his size and sometimes his shot selection. But size really is an overblown concern, at least on the offensive end. We've seen a ton of undersized guards have success as scorers in recent years, and he's improved his shot selection. I do try to be realistic when it comes to projecting where these prospects are at, and in all honesty, I think next year, if he plays a reasonable amount of minutes and the ball is actually in his hands, Rob Dillingham has the capacity to score in the high teens as far as points per game goes right off the bat. I truly believe he is that good as a bucket getter. Now, he has to earn those minutes by being more than just a scorer. Things like ability to play defense and play within a team are also factors. But as a pure scorer, I am very high on the ability he has shown thus far. Now, as a finisher, Rob is also solid. I mean, the guy is just a scorer at all three levels. It would be surprising if he didn't have some degree of finishing, but if there was one aspect of his offensive game that he has the most room to improve, it would be as a finisher. He has the ability to finish strong at times, and his touch around the rim really is quite effective as well, but he does have some struggles when he runs into contact. It really does come down to strength here, in my opinion. Dillingham isn't tall, obviously, but that isn't as much of a problem in taking contact as the strength is. He has, in my opinion, above average bounce, so he should be able to elevate high enough that the height would be a minor concern at most, but the strength will definitely always be a factor when it comes to absorbing contact. Like I mentioned, his touch is pretty good most times, but he does occasionally struggle to adapt to a big defender or a crowd of bodies in the paint. I think this is a pretty solvable problem. As he matures as a player more and more, the strength should come naturally, as well as even more control when taking the ball to the rim, but it isn't currently an elite skill of his. It isn't at the point where I would consider it a weakness, but it definitely is an area of improvement, if anything. There are some pros and cons to Rob Dillingham's playmaking. Everyone seems to envision him as a point guard, but he really is more of a combo guard with the ability to set others up. He isn't a good enough passer yet to be considered any level of playmaking point guard. He does do things well here. He can run a pick and roll competently, he makes good reads fairly often, and when in the mindset to set others up, his court vision is above average. He's shown really good improvement as a playmaker additionally. The major thing for him is continuing to show progress on this front because he still has some of the same flaws that plagued him while he was with OTE and Donda Academy. His decision making primarily is the number one thing, so obviously like I mentioned he's improved it quite a bit, especially as a shot creator, and his decision making has vastly improved in that aspect. It's better as a passer as well, but there's still some times where he will force passes or dribble into an area he shouldn't have and find himself turning the ball over. This is most apparent when he gets in the air regularly and doesn't know where he's going with the ball. He throws a lot of turnovers off jump passes. He really needs to cut down on those and generally just improve his decision making overall. But playmaking is definitely an area where, again, like finishing, not necessarily a super weakness, but it's definitely an area of improvement that he 100% will need to get better if he plans on being a lead guard with the ball in his hands for the entirety of the game. Now, defense is the one major area where you definitely could find a weakness in Dillingham's game. He by no means whatsoever should be considered a good or even decent defender, and this really comes down to two things. The first one is over-aggressiveness. He really just has a habit of over-pursuing passing lanes and hunting steals way too often. It ends up putting him out of position. Really, this is something that's easily coachable and something I don't think can't be fixed for him long-term. Now, his second problem is one that's probably never going away totally and is the reason why he'll never probably be a great defender in the NBA, and that is, of course, his size. Now, I said earlier that his size isn't the biggest deal when it comes to offense, and it really isn't. Like I said earlier, there's other ways to score as a smaller player. We see it with numerous other guys around the league. The problem does come on the defensive end. You very rarely see guys who are super small end up being great defenders. There are some people who think even someone like Reed Sheppard won't be a good defender in the NBA because of how small he is. I don't agree with those people, but there are people that think that, and Dillingham is smaller than Reed Sheppard and a significantly worse defender. He just doesn't have the strength or the tenacity to stick with opposing players on the defensive end. Again, I don't think this is something he'll ever truly develop. I think it's just something that a team that drafts him will have to cope with. Hope that he gets better at it, but in all likelihood, he'll never be a great defender or even likely a above average defender. For a comparison, I expect a role for Dillingham somewhat similar to what Steve Francis provided for the Rockets. They're a little different as players. Dillingham is a bit smaller than Francis, but neither were particularly tall, and Dillingham is slightly more finesse, but the way that they play the game is similar. Score first, flashy players who have a good ability to get to the rim and a capacity for really impressive shot making at all three levels. Dillingham at Kentucky was more efficient of a shooter and scorer than Francis was, but it's probable that at least at first his efficiency will take a hit when he comes into the league and will not stay at the levels it was at Kentucky this past season. Additionally, neither are good defensive players. All in all though, Dillingham is some mix of high scoring, quick guards with a great handle. He really isn't a one-for-one comparison to any of them, but he shows a lot of similarities to that archetype of player. Bits and pieces of guys like Jamal Crawford, AI, young Brandon Jennings, Stephon Marbury, Francis, etc. In conclusion, Rob Dillingham is one of my favorite prospects in this draft overall, especially where he is currently being valued. Yes, there is flaws to his game. Measuring at like 160 pounds at the combine isn't at all a positive, and things like decision making and defensive ability are true flaws. But we know that 6'1", 160 isn't a death sentence to NBA players' prospects. We have Trae Young, who, for all the complaints people have about him, would easily go number one in this draft if he was a rookie and we knew what he was going to end up being as a player. And I'm not saying Rob is Trae Young, they are different as players. I'm just saying that while the size thing isn't ideal, players have succeeded at being small in the NBA. I've always said one of the most important things you look for in making a bet on a prospect with high-end potential and what they could be is, do they have at least one truly elite trait that they can lean on in the NBA? Not every player in this draft lottery has that. Rob is an elite shot creator. I am highly confident that his ability will translate. I'm seeing him mocked in late single digits to the end of the lottery in a lot of mocks currently, and to me, in this draft, that's a steal. Every single player here in this draft has notable flaws, even at the very top end, but only a few have an elite skill or project to be NBA level offensively immediately, And to me, if Dillingham gets his defense to a more acceptable level and continues to work on his playmaking and decision making, I think he could legitimately be one of the biggest difference makers in this draft. And I like his odds of hitting that potential more than a number of guys projected above him. Would I take him number 1? Probably not. I don't think he has the highest ceiling in this draft. I think that guys like Sarr, Hovland, Buzelis, Castle, and Topic have higher theoretical ceilings if everything goes right for them. But for some of them, a lot more has to change than what would for Dillingham. The odds of them hitting their ceilings are less likely in some cases. Dillingham doesn't, to me, have that elite MVP level ceiling, but he does have the ceiling of a 20+ point per game scorer, whether that be as an elite 6-man or starter, and a well above average playmaker. Overall, based on the skill set he has now and where I think it's likely he could develop into, he's definitely in the conversation in the top 5 for me, especially if he fits a need. And with all that, we conclude this video. The draft is quickly approaching and teams are beginning to narrow down who they're considering as draft prospects, so if you enjoy this type of video, be sure to like and subscribe as I have a lot more on the way before this draft begins. But thanks again for everyone for watching, and hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hey, thanks again for watching this video. If you like what you saw, go ahead and click on one of these videos here to see more.